Hello, today we're going to discuss this beautiful painting by Winslow Homer called Four Leaf Clover. The painting is in the collection of the Detroit Institute of Arts in Detroit, Michigan, which just happens to be my former employer, and it was painted in 1873, the Four Leaf Clover by Winslow Homer. Homer was one of the most important visual artists of the late 1800s. He was born in 1836, and he began his career as a Civil War uh, illustrator, doing depictions of the war for Harper's Weekly, among other publications. And he also did a number of paintings of the Civil War. Here are two of his more well known works from that era: The Sharpshooter on the left, and Prisoners from the Front on the right, two of his more well known Civil War depictions. After the war, Homer, though, shifts gears and he does a whole series of paintings spanning several years depicting children in rural environments. And we have a great example here, the four leaf clover, which Homer did again in 1873, or 8 years after the Civil War ended. There's a lot of symbolism and interesting imagery in this painting. Like, for instance, the prominent aspect of the painting is this young girl in a white dress who is seated off to the side of the work, and she's holding a four leaf clover. Children were very important in artwork after the Civil War because they represented innocence and they hadn't been scarred by all the death and destruction that had taken place during the war, at least not as much as the adults had. And oftentimes in art, the color white, as in her pure white dress, can symbolize or represent purity. And then the flowers that are surrounding her, and even the four leaf clover in her hand. Typically in artwork, flowers represent life and rebirth and things like that. So interesting that Homer's encapsulated all these into a single painting, the four leaf clover. There's also a really big push at this point in time, or a big interest in nostalgia for rural America and kind of the simpler times and a simpler way of life, which is real contrast to the Civil War because during those years, there's an increase in industrialization to support the war effort and also an increase in urbanization as people in the 1800s flocked to the city. So Homer's painting, The Four Leaf Clover, really a great response to the trends that are taking place in America with the industrialization, the urbanization, and thus you have this beautiful painting. Now, the approach that Homer took was not unique to him. A number of artists, and not even just visual artists, authors, literary figures, and things like that, sculptors, they're also pursuing the same type of ideal of this rural America, the simpler way of life. The innocence of children, they represent the future. It was around the same time that Louisa May Alcott wrote Little Woman in 1868, and Mark Twain wrote Tom Sawyer in 1876. And so, if you look at those two literary works, you can kind of see some similarities of the direction that people are going with these embracing of childhood and rural themes and things like that after the war. Homer did a number of depictions of children in rural settings. A couple examples that are also well known works of his. This one is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. It's called Snap the Whip from 1872. And you have this very innocent group of young boys, and they're playing this game called Snap the Whip out in front of a one room schoolhouse. And then another example that's at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, you have Boys in a Pasture from 1874. And you have two children that are sitting here out in the warm sun, looking off into the distance. So, very idyllic scene here by Homer. And if you compare and contrast these two works to the Four Leaf Clover, which was done all these works around the same time, you can see a lot of similarities, even though the subjects are different. Kind of the style and the approach and the subject matter per se that he's depicting here, very similar along these lines. Now, if you're wondering about the title, The Four Leaf Clover, It's a rare variation of the common three-leaf clover, and according to traditional sayings, such clovers bring good luck or good fortune, though it is not clear when or how this idea began. And your odds of finding a four-leaf clover are several thousand to one, but perhaps you've seen one at some point in time during your life. Some other interesting aspects of this painting is the prominence of this really dark, kind of creepy window in the center of the painting. Artists are very familiar with how our eyes work, and usually an artist will put the most important aspect of a painting in the center, front and center. And that's not the case here. The girl is the most important aspect of the work, at least we would think she is. But she's off to the side and there's this dark window. Now, maybe this is a common architectural feature that you might see in different parts of America. It's not uncommon to see a window in a building, but the fact that it's dark, we can't see inside of it, and it really contrasts a lot with the lighter colors of the paint on the building, her white dress, her bonnet, and then also the greenery of the plants and the flowers and things like that, and even the grass. So some people have kind of wondered if that has any kind of symbolism to it. Is this darkness, this black hole, kind of a fact that maybe Homer and specifically, and maybe the United States in general, we haven't gotten a complete closure yet from the Civil War. So I don't know, something for you to think about, but it's a beautiful painting nonetheless. One of my favorites. Again, it's at the Detroit Institute of Arts, four-leaf clover from 1873. There is that dark window. And again, a really fascinating contrast when you compare it to the young girl sitting there very peacefully in the white dress. And notice that she's even looking at the window because the clover is here. Man, her eyes are here, and it looks like she's gazing towards that window as opposed to the clover or something else. So, something for you to think about. There's Winslow Homer, and there's a full view of the painting. Homer was, again, one of the most important painters of the mid and 1800s in America and made a number of fabulous artworks. If you'd like to learn more about his life and career, we have a longer program on our YouTube channel. It's called Winslow Homer and the American Experience. It's a 2 hour overview of Homer's life and career, and you can check that out on our YouTube channel, which is called Washington, D.C. History and Culture. So thanks so much for joining us. Hope you got to learn a little bit more about Winslow Homer and see one of my favorite paintings he created. That's all for now, and we'll see you next time.